Some ancient water chambers may not have been built only to hold water. They may have been built to hold reflection. Not reflection as decoration, reflection as a field. A way for the room to return itself, a way for light to become visible twice, a way for the human being to see the space above and the space within. Still water changes everything inside a chamber. A stone ceiling becomes a sky below. A beam of light becomes a path across the surface. A carved symbol becomes doubled. A dark room suddenly has depth. And the body feels this before the mind explains it. When water is completely still, the room becomes quieter. The eyes slow down. The breath follows. The nervous system begins to notice that nothing in the space is rushing. Maybe this was part of the ancient design. Maybe the mirror chamber was not only a sacred room. Maybe it was a place where the human state could be reflected back. Not through words, not through teaching, not through force, but through stillness. A restless body disturbs water. A hurried mind misses reflection. But when the person becomes quiet enough, the surface begins to show more. The room appears again. The light appears again. The body appears inside the field and something subtle begins to happen. The human being does not only look at the water. The human being becomes aware of how they are standing before it, how they are breathing, how they are moving, how much noise they are carrying. This is the quiet intelligence of reflection. It does not command. It reveals. It does not explain, it returns. Maybe ancient builders understood that a mirror does not need to speak to change the one who looks into it, especially when the mirror is not made of glass, but of water, a living surface, soft, sensitive, responsive. Still water reflects only when it is undisturbed. Maybe that was the teaching, not a belief, not a symbol to worship, but a condition to enter, become still enough. And the chamber begins to show you what was already there. This is different from looking at a wall. A wall holds form, but water holds relationship. It shows the room and the viewer together. It shows above and below at once. It makes the chamber feel deeper than its physical size. Maybe this is why water was placed inside certain sacred spaces, because it could make silence visible. It could make light softer. It could make the body aware of its own disturbance. A mirror chamber may have been a place where the outer room and inner state met on one surface. Stone around the body, light above the water, reflection below the eyes in the center. The person standing between worlds, not outside the structure, part of it. Maybe the deeper purpose was not to show a perfect image. Maybe it was to reveal alignment. When the body slows, the surface settles. When the breath softens, the room becomes clearer. When the tension returns, the reflection becomes whole. This is why still water feels sacred. Not because it performs, because it waits. It waits for the movement to stop. It waits for the breath to listen. It waits for the person to arrive fully. And when that happens, the chamber changes. Not because the stone moved, not because the water spoke, but because the human being finally became quiet enough to see the field. Maybe the mirror chamber was never about the image. Maybe it was about the state required to receive the image. A state of calm, a state of presence, a state where the body no longer fights the room, but enters rhythm with it. This may be one of the lost forms of ancient knowledge, the use of reflection, not as beauty alone, but as a way to return the human being to presence. Water below, light above, stone around, breath within, and in that meeting something begins to remember. Not a story, not a name, but a state of being still enough to see clearly. Still water does not only reflect what is above, it also suggests what is beneath. A surface can be calm and still hold depth. This may be why water inside ancient chambers feels different. It creates two worlds at once. The visible world above the surface and the unseen world below it. Stone, light, shadow, reflection, and then depth. The moment the eyes meet still water, the body understands something silently. There's more here than what appears on the surface. Maybe this was part of the ancient design, not only to make the room beautiful, but to create a feeling of inner descent. A chamber with still water asks the body to slow down, but depth asks the body to go inward, not physically, energetically. The tension begins to drop. The breath becomes lower. The mind stops reaching outward and begins to listen beneath itself. This is the power of depth. It does not explain, it pulls awareness downward, gently, quietly, without force. A shallow room can become endless when water is placed at its center. The ceiling reflects below. The light stretches into darkness. A symbol appears on the surface and then disappears into the depth beneath it. The chamber becomes more than a room. It becomes a threshold between seen and unseen. Maybe ancient builders understood that the human being carries a surface too. The words we speak, the face we show, the plans we announce, the version of ourselves that moves through the world. But beneath that surface, there is another field, older, quieter, more honest. And maybe certain spaces were built to bring the human being closer to that field, not by asking questions, but by changing the environment. Stone for grounding, light for awareness, water for reflection, depth for remembrance. Inside a still water chamber, the body cannot rush easily. The space does not support speed, it supports descent. A slower gaze, a softer breath, a deeper listening. The water does not need to move to feel alive. Its stillness is what makes the depths stronger. When the surface is disturbed, we only see movement. But when the surface becomes still, we begin to feel what is underneath. Maybe this was the teaching. That clarity does not come from more motion. It comes from less disturbance. The deeper chamber begins where the surface becomes quiet. This is true in water, and it is true in the body. When the nervous system is restless, everything reflects distortion. But when the body settles, something deeper becomes visible. Not as an image, as a knowing, a quiet recognition that the surface was never the whole truth. Maybe ancient water chambers were built for this recognition, to remind the human being that depth is always present, but not always accessible. It requires stillness. It requires patience. It requires the willingness to stop touching the surface. A pool of water in a sacred room can become a silent teacher. It teaches without language. It says, do not only look at what reflects, feel what is beneath the reflection. Do not only trust the surface, listen for the depth. Do not rush the moment. Let the chamber reveal itself slowly. Maybe this is why still water and sacred architecture belong together so naturally. Both carry the same message. The structure has an outer form, but its deeper field is felt inside. Water has a visible surface, but its deeper presence is below. And the human being has a visible life, but the deeper self is often waiting beneath noise, pressure, and movement. In the ancient chamber, these three mirrors meet: the room, the water, the body. And when all three become quiet, depth begins to speak, not loudly, not as a voice, but as a presence, a feeling that there is more below the surface than the world has taught us to notice. Maybe the lost knowledge was not only how to build with stone and water. Maybe it was how to design spaces that guided the human being inward. Spaces where reflection opened the door and depth invited the return. Maybe some ancient chambers invited the return through words. Maybe they remembered through water. Not memory like a written record, not memory like a story carved into stone, but memory as a field. A way the room could hold movement, light, silence, and presence without needing to explain them. Still water receives everything. The light above it, the shadow beside it, the ceiling it reflects, the person standing near it. Even the smallest movement changes the surface. And when the movement passes, the water returns to stillness again. Maybe this return was part of the teaching, not holding everything forever, but returning again and again to the original calm. A chamber built around still water may have carried this message in its design. No force, no noise, no command, only the quiet rhythm of return. Light enters, water receives it. A breath moves, the surface responds, the room becomes visible twice, and then everything settles. This is a different kind of knowledge, not knowledge that tells the mind what to believe, knowledge that shows the body how to return. Maybe ancient builders understood that the human being forgets through disturbance, through speed, through noise, through too much outer movement. And maybe they created spaces where the body could remember what stillness feels like. A chamber that remembers does not need to speak. It holds conditions: stone that grounds, water that reflects, light that arrives, shadow that gives depth, silence that lets the nervous system listen again. Inside such a space, remembrance is not dramatic, it is subtle. The body softens, the breath lowers, the eyes stop searching. The inner field begins to settle. And slowly, the person remembers a state that was never truly gone. This may be the deeper purpose of the still water chamber. Not to give answers, but to return the human being to the part of themselves that can receive answers. A restless body cannot hear the chamber. A hurried mind cannot see the reflection. A tense nervous system cannot feel the depth. But when the body becomes quiet, the room becomes clear. Maybe this is why still water feels ancient. Because it carries no urgency. It waits, it reflects, it returns, again and again. And maybe this is what the chamber was built to teach. Return, not as a concept, as an experience. The surface becomes disturbed, then still again. The light disappears, then returns again. The shadow moves, then settles again. The breath leaves, then enters again. Everything in the chamber moves toward return. Maybe the ancient world understood that healing was not always about adding something new. Sometimes it was about creating a place where the original rhythm could be felt again. A rhythm beneath thought, beneath identity, beneath the noise of becoming. The quiet rhythm of being. Stone, water, light, and silence may have worked together to remind the human being of this rhythm. Not through belief, through presence. Not through explanation, through atmosphere. Not through pressure, through design. This is why a chamber can feel alive, because the room is not empty. It is holding a relationship between what moves and what returns, between the surface and the depth, between the person and the field. Maybe the chamber does not remember for us. Maybe it helps us remember ourselves. It gives the body a place where stillness is not an idea. It is visible, it is reflected, it is felt. And when the human being enters that field, something ancient responds. Not from the past, from within. A knowing, a calm, a recognition. The sense that beneath every disturbance there is still a place in us that knows how to return. Maybe this is the lost knowledge of the chamber that remembers that memory is not always stored in words. Sometimes it is held in conditions in water still enough to reflect, in stone quiet enough to ground, in light soft enough to reveal, in silence deep enough for the body to come home. Maybe the chamber did not remember the past. Maybe it helped the body remember how to return. Instagram exclusive. Instagram exclusive. Instagram exclusive.